These are the most devastating tragedies that have happened in the world, and the last one is so traumatizing that it could literally make you pee in your pants. First is the 9/11 attacks. On the morning of September 11th, 2001, began as a bright, clear, late summer day on the east coast of the United States. Millions of people were starting their workday, unaware that the world was about to change. In a coordinated act, 19 terrorists hijacked 4 commercial airliners. Their targets were iconic symbols of American economic and military power. At 8:46 a.m., American Airlines Flight 11 struck the North Tower of the World Trade Center in New York City. 17 minutes later, United Airlines Flight 175 hit the South Tower, confirming to a watching world that this was a deliberate attack. At 9:37 a.m., American Airlines Flight 77 crashed into the Pentagon in Arlington, Virginia. The fourth plane, United Airlines Flight 93, crashed into a field in Pennsylvania. Evidence suggests that, after learning of the other attacks, the passengers and crew fought back against the hijackers, preventing the plane from reaching its target in Washington, D.C. The structural damage and intense fires caused both World Trade Center towers to collapse, engulfing Lower Manhattan in a massive cloud of dust and debris. In total, 2,977 people from more than 90 countries lost their lives in the attacks. The immediate aftermath was a scene of shock, rescue, and profound grief. The events led to the global war on terror, the creation of the Department of Homeland Security, and a complete overhaul of aviation security worldwide. The site of the destruction has been transformed into a place of remembrance. It proves that a single moment can reshape the geopolitical landscape and redefine a generation's sense of security. Next is the Titanic. On April 15, 1912, the sinking of the RMS Titanic occurred when the British passenger liner sank in the North Atlantic Ocean during its voyage to New York City. The ship, built by the White Star Line, was the largest and most luxurious of its time and was considered unsinkable due to its advanced safety features, including 16 watertight compartments. However, these compartments did not extend high enough to fully prevent flooding in the event of a breach. On the night of April 14th at 11:40 p.m., the Titanic struck an iceberg. The iceberg scraped along the ship's starboard side, creating a series of small punctures across several watertight compartments. Although the ship initially appeared stable, it soon became clear that the first 5 compartments were flooding more than the ship could stay afloat with. Over the next few hours, the Titanic began to sink, and despite the distress calls, the nearest ship capable of assisting, the Carpathia, was too far away to arrive in time. The sinking was worsened due to a shortage of lifeboats, as there were only 20 on board, which was enough for only half of the passengers and crew. This was due to outdated seagoing regulations. Additionally, many lifeboats were launched only partially filled, as many people hesitated to leave the ship. Out of approximately 2,224 people on board, only 706 survived, with the disaster claiming the lives of more than 1,500 passengers and crew members, most of them from the ship's lower-class compartments, as well as crew members who had less access to lifeboats. The sinking of the Titanic remains one of the deadliest tragedies in history to have occurred in the ocean, and it led to many changes in seagoing safety regulations, including requirements for sufficient lifeboats and the establishment of the International Ice Patrol to monitor iceberg threats in the North Atlantic. Next is the slavery. On 1619, African-American slavery began when the first African captives were brought to the British colony of Virginia. Over the next 2 centuries, slavery became a central institution, especially in the southern states, where the economy relied heavily on agricultural production, specifically tobacco, cotton, and sugar. Millions of Africans were forcibly taken from their homelands, shipped across the Atlantic in brutal conditions, and sold into lifelong oppression. Slavery lasted until the Civil War, when the Emancipation Proclamation was issued in 1863 by President Abraham Lincoln, freeing enslaved people in Confederate-held areas. However, it was not until the 13th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution, ratified in 1865, that slavery was officially abolished across the entire country. An estimated 12 to 15 million Africans were enslaved during the transatlantic slave trade. though many millions more were indirectly affected, including the descendants of enslaved people and those who suffered from the economic and social systems built upon slavery. Enslaved people endured extreme physical and psychological suffering, including family separation, forced labor, and violence. After the emancipation, formerly enslaved African Americans faced significant challenges, including systematic racism, poverty, and limited access to education, employment, and political rights. The impact of slavery continued through segregation, disenfranchisement, and racial violence well into the 20th century, but thankfully, the civil rights movement of the 1950s and 60s became a turning point in the fight for equality, leading to legislation like the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and the Voting Rights Act of 1965. The impact of slavery is still felt today in the racial disparities in wealth, education, criminal justice, and health in the United States, and many African Americans continue to work towards social and economic justice, addressing the continued effects of this tragic chapter in history. Next is the bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki on August 1945. The United States dropped the bombs to hasten Japan's surrender and avoid a costly invasion, as the Pacific War had been prolonged and brutal, with Japan showing no signs of surrender. On August 6, 1945, the U.S. dropped an atomic bomb codenamed Little Boy on Hiroshima, which was a major Japanese military and industrial hub. The bomb, containing uranium-235, detonated at 8:15 a.m., releasing an explosion equivalent to about 15 kilotons of TNT. The blast obliterated the city, instantly killing an estimated 70,000 to 80,000 people, with many more dying from injuries and radiation sickness in the days and months that followed, bringing the death toll to over 140,000 by the end of 1945. The intense heat and radiation caused horrific burns, while the shock wave leveled buildings, leaving survivors with long-term health effects. 3 days later, on August 9, 1945, the United States dropped a second bomb called Fat Man on Nagasaki, a city with significant industrial importance. This plutonium bomb was even more powerful, with a yield of about 21 kilotons, though the city's mountainous terrain limited the destruction. An estimated 40,000 people were killed instantly, with the total number of deaths reaching around 70,000 by the end of the year. The bombings prompted Japan to surrender on August 15, 1945, officially bringing World War II to an end. These events raised ethical debates about the use of nuclear weapons and sparked the Cold War arms race. In total, the two bombings killed over 200,000 people and left lasting scars on Japan's landscape, health, and society. The survivors' suffering and the bombing's global impact continue to influence discussions on war and peace today. Next is the Texas City disaster, which occurred on April 16, 1947, remains one of the deadliest industrial accidents in United States history. It began when a French cargo ship, the SS Grand Camp, docked in the port of Texas City and caught fire while it was being loaded with ammonium nitrate fertilizer, a highly explosive material commonly used in agriculture. The fire was discovered around 8 a.m., and despite efforts to extinguish it, the situation quickly spiraled out of control. As the fire intensified, the captain ordered the hatches sealed in an attempt to starve the flames of oxygen, but this proved to be ineffective. At 9:12 a.m., the ammonium nitrate ignited, triggering a massive explosion that obliterated the Grand Camp and sent a towering mushroom cloud into the sky, with the blast being heard up to 150 miles away. The explosion unleashed devastating shockwaves, destroying nearby buildings, homes, and factories, and the docks were completely leveled, with nearby oil refineries and chemical plants catching fire, worsening the disaster. The explosion also launched flaming debris, including parts of the Grand Camp, into surrounding areas, igniting further fires. A second explosion occurred the next day when another ship, the SS High Flyer, also loaded with ammonium nitrate, detonated, and the combined blasts resulted in widespread destruction across Texas City. This disaster killed an estimated 581 people, including firefighters, dock workers, and onlookers, and also injured over 5,000 more. Many of the victims were never identified, and the explosions left thousands of people homeless, with hundreds of buildings being destroyed and millions of dollars in damage. Next is the Bhopal gas tragedy. One of the world's worst industrial disasters occurred on the night of December 2nd to 3rd, 1984, in Bhopal, India. It began at the Union Carbide India Limited pesticide plant, where a highly toxic chemical called methyl isocyanate, also known as MIC, was being stored in large quantities for the production of pesticides. Poor maintenance, faulty safety systems, and inadequate training of staff created dangerous conditions at the plant. On the night of the disaster, water inadvertently entered a tank containing about 42 tons of MIC, triggering a runaway chemical reaction. The increase in pressure and temperature inside the tank caused a massive leak of MIC gas and other poisonous chemicals. The safety mechanisms designed to neutralize leaks, such as refrigeration and scrubbers, either malfunctioned or had been turned off to save costs. The toxic gas cloud spread quickly over nearby residential areas where tens of thousands of people were sleeping. Many awoke, coughing, choking, and with burning eyes, and panic spread as the gas caused immediate health effects, including nausea, breathlessness, and blindness. The dense slums surrounding the plant were particularly vulnerable, and within hours, thousands of people were dead, and chaos gripped the city as hospitals were overwhelmed. Official estimates suggest around 3,000 people died within the first few days, while subsequent estimates put the death toll at over 15,000 due to long-term health complications. An estimated 500,000 people were exposed to the gas, leading to chronic illnesses, respiratory issues, blindness, and birth defects in the years that followed. The Bhopal gas tragedy sparked widespread outrage and legal battles over corporate responsibility. Union Carbide faced international criticism, but survivors of this tragedy have struggled for decades to obtain adequate compensation and health care. Next is the Space Shuttle Challenger disaster. Occurred on January 28, 1986, when NASA's Space Shuttle Challenger broke apart just 73 seconds after liftoff, killing all 7 crew members aboard. The launch took place at Kennedy Space Center in Florida and was highly anticipated because it included a schoolteacher who was set to be the first civilian in space. The disaster was caused by the failure of an O-ring, a rubber seal, in one of the solid rocket boosters. The shuttle was launched on a particularly cold morning, with engineers having raised concerns that the low temperatures could affect the O-ring's elasticity. Despite these warnings, NASA proceeded with the launch. Shortly after liftoff, at 11:39 a.m., the faulty O-ring failed, allowing hot gases to escape and damage the external fuel tank. This led to a catastrophic failure as flames burned through the tank, causing the shuttle to break apart in midair. The disaster was broadcast live on television, shocking the world, and all 7 crew members aboard Challenger were killed. As the crew cabin separated from the rest of the shuttle and plunged into the ocean, the exact moment of death remains uncertain, but it is believed that the crew survived the initial breakup and lost consciousness during the descent. Next is the Halifax explosion. Occurred on December 6, 1917, in Halifax, Nova Scotia, and remains one of the most devastating explosions in history. The disaster began when 2 ships collided in the narrow Halifax harbor, the French cargo ship Mont Blanc and the Norwegian ship Imo. The Mont Blanc was loaded with highly volatile materials, including TNT, benzol, and picric acid. As the 2 ships maneuvered through the harbor's narrows, miscommunications and navigational errors led to a collision. The impact ignited explosions on the Mont Blanc, and the crew, realizing the imminent danger, abandoned the ship. However, the burning vessel drifted toward the busy waterfront, drawing in a crowd of onlookers unaware of the danger. At 9:04 a.m., the Mont Blanc exploded with catastrophic force. The blast leveled much of the northern part of Halifax and the neighboring community of Richmond. The explosion released an estimated energy equivalent to 2.9 kilotons of TNT, creating a powerful shockwave that shattered windows as far as 50 miles away and generated a massive tsunami in the harbor. Over 2,000 people were killed, including many children and workers in nearby factories and homes. Approximately 9,000 people were injured, some blinded by flying glass or trapped under debris. The explosion also destroyed 12,000 buildings, leaving thousands of people homeless. Hospitals were overwhelmed, and relief efforts were quickly mobilized from across Canada and the United States. The Halifax explosion prompted significant advances in emergency management and disaster response, and it remains a defining moment in the city's history. Next is the Holocaust. It was the systematic state-sponsored genocide of 6 million Jews by Nazi Germany and its collaborators during World War II. It began with the rise of Adolf Hitler and the Nazi Party in 1933, whose anti-Semitic ideology blamed Jewish people for Germany's economic problems and portrayed them as a threat to the Aryan race. After gaining power, the Nazis implemented increasingly oppressive laws, such as the Nuremberg Laws of 1935, which stripped Jews of their rights and launched a campaign of widespread persecution. The situation worsened after the outbreak of World War II in 1939, when Nazi Germany began its conquest of Europe. Jews in occupied territories were rounded up and forced into ghettos under horrible conditions. In 1941, Nazi leaders initiated the final solution, a plan to exterminate the Jewish population. This led to the construction of extermination camps such as Auschwitz, Treblinka, and Sobibor, where millions of Jews were systematically murdered in gas chambers. Aside from Jews, the Nazis targeted other groups they deemed undesirable, including Romani people, disabled individuals, Slavic people, political dissidents, and LGBTQ+ individuals. The Holocaust's brutality extended to mass shootings, death marches, forced labor, starvation, and medical experiments, leaving millions of victims dead or deeply scarred. By the time the Holocaust ended in 1945, with the Allied forces liberating the concentration camps, approximately 6 million Jews, 2/3 of Europe's Jewish population, had been killed. In addition, about 5 million non-Jewish victims also perished. The Holocaust remains one of the most horrific atrocities in human history, with survivors' testimonies serving as a reminder of the dangers of hatred and intolerance. Next is the Indian Ocean tsunami. On December 26, 2004, a massive undersea earthquake off the coast of Sumatra triggered one of the deadliest natural disasters in recorded history. The resulting tsunami unleashed waves over 100 feet high that swept across the Indian Ocean, striking 14 countries with little to no warning. Within hours, coastlines were transformed into wastelands. Entire coastal communities were obliterated within minutes. Indonesia, Sri Lanka, India, and Thailand were among the hardest hit, with villages wiped off the map. Over 230,000 people lost their lives, and millions were displaced from their homes. Beaches once filled with tourists turned into nightmarish scenes of chaos, with families torn apart, infrastructure destroyed, and livelihoods erased in a matter of moments. The disaster revealed the urgent need for a global early warning system. In its wake, governments and organizations worldwide pledged to strengthen monitoring technology to help prevent such catastrophic loss of life in the future. Aid poured in from around the globe, making it one of the largest humanitarian responses ever mobilized. Still, survivors carried deep scars, both emotional and physical, that would last for generations. The tsunami's haunting images, boats tossed onto rooftops, children searching for their parents, and mass graves hastily dug remain some of the most harrowing reminders of nature's raw power and humanity's fragility. It was a disaster that united the world in grief and compassion, even as it exposed the terrible cost of being unprepared for nature's wrath. Next is COVID-19. COVID-19 changed the world in a way few events ever have. In late 2019, doctors in Wuhan, China, began noticing a mysterious illness that caused severe pneumonia. The disease was later identified as COVID-19, caused by a new coronavirus called SARS-CoV-2. Within just a few months, the virus had spread across nearly every country, leading the World Health Organization to declare it a global pandemic on March 11, 2020. Because the virus spread easily from person to person, governments introduced lockdowns, travel restrictions, mask mandates, and social distancing measures to slow the outbreak. Schools and businesses were shut down, public events were canceled, and billions of people were left confined to their homes. Hospitals quickly became overwhelmed as millions of patients required medical care. Doctors and nurses worked around the clock, often risking their own lives to care for the sick, while scientists raced to develop vaccines in record time to give the world a powerful tool to fight the virus. By the time the pandemic began to ease, COVID-19 had infected hundreds of millions of people worldwide and claimed millions of lives. Beyond the loss of life, the pandemic caused economic crises, disrupted education, increased mental health problems, and permanently changed how people work, travel, and interact with one another. Even years later, the effects of COVID-19 continue to be felt around the world. It remains one of the most significant public health emergencies in modern history and serves as a reminder of how quickly a disease can reshape the lives of billions of people. Next is Chernobyl disaster. One of the worst nuclear accidents in history occurred on April 26, 1986, at the Chernobyl nuclear power plant in Pripyat, Ukraine. The accident occurred during a late-night safety test on reactor number 4, which simulated a power outage to test the reactor's emergency systems. However, a combination of operator error and fundamental design flaws in the reactor led to a catastrophic failure during the test. The reactor's power output dropped to near zero, and an attempt to recover it led to instability. Operators disabled critical safety systems, and the reactor went out of control. A sudden power surge caused an explosion in the reactor core, blowing off the roof of the building and releasing massive amounts of radioactive material into the atmosphere. Fires broke out, and radiation spread across Europe, particularly affecting Belarus, Ukraine, and Russia. The explosion immediately killed 2 plant workers, and in the days that followed, 28 emergency workers, including firefighters, died from acute radiation sickness after being exposed to extremely high doses of radiation while trying to contain the disaster. In total, it is estimated that about 50 direct deaths occurred due to the explosion and radiation. However, the long-term effects were far more severe. Tens of thousands of people were evacuated from the surrounding areas, and the exclusion zone around Chernobyl remains uninhabited to this day. Next is Columbine High School shooting. One of the deadliest school shootings in United States history took place on April 20, 1999, in Littleton, Colorado. 2 senior students, Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold, carried out a carefully planned attack that shocked the nation. Harris and Klebold had been planning the attack for over a year, amassing firearms, homemade bombs, and ammunition. On the morning of the attack, they planted bombs in the school's cafeteria, intending for them to explode and cause mass casualties. When the bombs failed to detonate, they entered the school armed with semi-automatic weapons and began shooting indiscriminately. The attack started at approximately 11:19 a.m. as Harris and Klebold opened fire on students outside the school before moving inside. They roamed the halls and library, shooting at anyone they encountered, laughing and taunting their victims. The pair also engaged in a brief gunfight with police officers who had quickly arrived on the scene. The shooting spree lasted about 47 minutes, after which Harris and Klebold retreated to the library and died by suicide. In total, 12 students and 1 teacher were killed, and 21 others were injured by gunfire. Many more suffered psychological trauma. The Columbine shooting had a profound impact on the United States, leading to debates on gun control, school security, and the influence of violent media. Next is the Deepwater Horizon oil spill. one of the worst environmental disasters in U.S. history. It began on April 20th, 2010, when a blowout occurred on the Deepwater Horizon oil rig, which was drilling an exploratory well in the Gulf of Mexico. The rig was owned by Transocean and leased by BP, and it was situated about 41 miles off the coast of Louisiana. The blowout was caused by a surge of natural gas, which blasted through a concrete core that had recently been placed to seal the well. The gas traveled up the drilling pipe and ignited, leading to a massive explosion on the platform. The explosion killed 11 workers on the rig and injured 17 others. The rig burned for 2 days before sinking into the Gulf. Following the rig's collapse, the damaged wellhead continued to spew oil into the ocean for 87 days before it was successfully capped. By that time, it is estimated that about 210 million gallons of crude oil had been released into the Gulf of Mexico. The spill caused widespread environmental damage, devastating marine ecosystems, harming wildlife, and polluting coastlines across 5 states. The region's fishing and tourism industries also suffered severe economic losses. In response to the disaster, BP and the United States government initiated a massive cleanup effort involving skimming, controlled burns, and the use of chemical dispersants to break up the oil. In the aftermath, BP and its partners faced multiple lawsuits, and BP paid billions of dollars in fines, penalties, and settlements. Next is the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear disaster. Occurred on March 11, 2011, following a massive earthquake and tsunami off the coast of Japan. The magnitude 9.0 earthquake, the most powerful ever recorded in Japan, triggered a series of large tsunami waves, some reaching up to 40 meters in height. These waves overwhelmed the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant, located in Fukushima Prefecture and operated by the Tokyo Electric Power Company. The tsunami flooded the plant, knocking out its power supply and disabling its cooling systems, which were essential for preventing overheating in the nuclear reactors. Without cooling, the reactors began to overheat, leading to 3 nuclear meltdowns over the next few days. Hydrogen gas built up in the reactor buildings, resulting in explosions that released radioactive materials into the air. The surrounding area became heavily contaminated, forcing the evacuation of over 150,000 people. Although there were no direct deaths from radiation exposure in the immediate aftermath, it did cause stress-related deaths, especially among the elderly, due to the evacuation and subsequent displacement. Estimates suggest that around 1,600 people died from these indirect causes. The release of radioactive material also contaminated land, water, and food supplies, and the government designated a 20-kilometer exclusion zone around the plant. The cleanup process is ongoing and is expected to take multiple decades, with significant challenges in decontaminating the reactors and storing radioactive waste. Next is the Sandy Hook Elementary School shooting. Occurred on December 14, 2012, in Newtown, Connecticut, and remains one of the deadliest mass shootings in United States history. The tragedy began when Adam Lanza, a 20-year-old local resident, shot and killed his mother at their home before driving to Sandy Hook Elementary School, armed with an assault rifle and other firearms. Lanza forced his way into the school by shooting through a glass window near the entrance. Once inside, Lanza opened fire on students and staff, and in the span of just 5 minutes, he killed 20 children between the ages of 6 and 7, along with 6 adult staff members. The staff included teachers and the principal, who tried to protect the children. In the chaos, some children and teachers managed to hide, preventing further casualties. Lanza ended the massacre by taking his own life with a self-inflicted gunshot wound when police arrived at the scene. The shooting sent shockwaves across the country, igniting a fierce debate over gun control and school safety. In the aftermath, President Barack Obama and other political leaders pushed for stricter gun control measures, including expanded background checks and bans on assault weapons. The victims are remembered annually, and the Sandy Hook Promise Foundation was created to advocate for the prevention of gun violence. Next is the Boston Marathon bombing. Took place on April 15, 2013, during the annual Boston Marathon. 2 homemade bombs were detonated near the finish line, causing widespread devastation. The bombs, made from pressure cookers filled with shrapnel, exploded about 12 seconds apart in the crowded spectator area, killing 3 people and injuring over 260 others. Many of the injured suffered severe wounds, with several people requiring amputations. The perpetrators were later identified as 2 brothers, Tamerlan and Dzhokhar Tsarnaev, ethnic Chechens who had lived in the United States for several years. The bombing triggered a massive manhunt as law enforcement agencies, including the FBI and local police, searched for the attackers. A breakthrough came on April 18th when the 2 brothers killed a police officer during their escape attempt. They later carjacked a vehicle, leading police on a high-speed chase and engaging in a shootout in the Boston suburb of Watertown. During the confrontation, one of the brothers was killed, but the other managed to escape. A citywide lockdown followed, and on April 19th, the surviving brother was found hiding in a boat in a Watertown backyard and was arrested. He was later convicted on multiple charges, including using a weapon of mass destruction, and was sentenced to death. Next is the Las Vegas shooting. Also known as the Route 91 Harvest Festival shooting, occurred on October 1, 2017. The massacre took place during a country music festival on the Las Vegas Strip with over 22,000 attendees. The shooter, a 64-year-old man from Nevada, opened fire from the 32nd floor of the Mandalay Bay Hotel, where he had set up an arsenal of firearms. The shooter had checked into the hotel several days earlier, bringing with him 23 guns, many of which were equipped with bump stocks, devices that allow semi-automatic weapons to fire more rapidly. At approximately 10:05 p.m., during singer Jason Aldean's performance, the shooter began firing into the crowded festival grounds below, unleashing more than 1,000 rounds of ammunition. The shooting lasted for about 10 minutes as panicked concertgoers tried to flee the scene. In total, 58 people were killed in the attack, and over 850 others were injured either by gunfire or in the chaos that ensued. The shooter was later found dead in his hotel room from a self-inflicted gunshot wound. Next is the Beirut explosion. Occurred on August 4, 2020, at the port of Beirut in Lebanon. It was one of the largest non-nuclear explosions in history, caused by the accidental detonation of 2,750 tons of ammonium nitrate that had been improperly stored in a warehouse at the port for 6 years. The explosion began with a fire at the port, which led to a smaller blast before culminating in a massive explosion that sent a mushroom cloud into the air. The blast was felt as far away as Cyprus, over 150 miles away, and caused significant damage to buildings and infrastructure up to 10 kilometers from the epicenter. The explosion killed at least 218 people, injured over 7,000, and left an estimated 300,000 people homeless. Large parts of Beirut were left in ruins, including homes, businesses, and hospitals. The long-term effects of the explosion have been catastrophic for Lebanon, a country already grappling with political instability, economic collapse, and widespread corruption. The blast deepened Lebanon's economic crisis, with billions of dollars in property damage and critical infrastructure destroyed. Next is the Tiananmen Square massacre. Occurred between April 15th and June 4th, 1989, in Beijing, China. It was a pro-democracy movement led by students, intellectuals, and workers who initially gathered to mourn the death of Hu Yaobang, a former Communist Party leader known for advocating political reform. What began as a peaceful protest for greater political freedoms, government accountability, and an end to corruption soon grew into a larger movement, with thousands of people demanding democratic reforms. For weeks, the protesters occupied Tiananmen Square, staging hunger strikes, marches, and sit-ins. The Chinese government, led by Deng Xiaoping, grew increasingly alarmed by the scale of the protests, viewing them as a threat to Communist Party control. On the night of June 3rd and into the early hours of June 4th, the government declared martial law and sent in troops and tanks to clear the square by force. The crackdown resulted in a violent massacre, during which soldiers opened fire on unarmed protesters and civilians, killing an unknown number of people. Estimates of the death toll vary from several hundred to potentially thousands. The Chinese government has never released an official figure, and the exact number of victims remains disputed. In the aftermath, the government arrested thousands of protesters and imposed strict censorship, erasing public memory of the events. Those were some of the most devastating tragedies in history, each leaving behind countless lives lost and communities forever changed. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe. Thank you for watching.